Hello, my name is Hakon and welcome back to my channel and a little update on my ongoing synth DIY project where I have been creating these passive attenuator modules and also this MIDI to CV interface module to go with the MIDIMuso CV12 interface to use with my Phenol synth so that I can attenuate more than I could before, and also so that I can control more control voltage from primarily from the Zoia or via the Zoia if it is from somewhere else. Now, every time I have tried out the MIDI to CV interface, there has been some issues. I've always had some hiccups with it. Sometimes it's been working fine, sometimes it stopped working and I've had to restart it, which basically involves changing the mode twice. And when I tested it out a few days ago, after wiring up the ground connections, the only thing that was working consistently all the time were the MIDI gates. And the way the gates work is that they respond to a particular note value on a single channel. So only one of these gates can be active at any one point of time. And I had a lot of fun playing with that. So basically what I'm doing then is each of these gates is getting a fixed voltage. And then I adjust that with a potentiometer here, and that was sent to 5 different outputs on the Phenol. That was great fun and it worked really well. And then that too stopped working. And then I thought that if the gates work that well, and I'm having so much fun using the gates, there is one other thing that I could do, and I've been thinking about this a long time ago as well, that will work quite well, and that is what I was testing a few days ago, and I used it with my Zoia. I made a little video about that. I'll put a link up here. Is to use a 4017 decade counter chip to create a sequencer. So this is now getting voltage from the Zoia, and it's getting voltage and a gate input, and then it's sending through the voltage and lighting up the LED and then sending that voltage out, which can be done in 2 different ways now. It can either be like here, where you have single gate outputs, or all the gates can then be, all the outputs can be sent into a single chain, which works as a sequencer. So I tried the sequencer mode now a few days ago. I set up this 5-step sequencer, and that worked rather well. It did have some little glitches and things, but I think that's mostly down to the breadboard I'm using not being the best quality, and so some of these connections are a little bit loose. But that doesn't actually matter. What matters to me is that I get the voltages sent out. It does not have to be consistent for me to use this musically, because if you have listened to any of my music videos, you know that I'm working with experimental music. So for me, a lot of fun can be had by this not working consistently. Another thing I noticed, of course, as well, which was really great to discover, because I was touching the circuitry when I was moving things around and moving the, because you can set how many steps are active here. I bumped into one of the diodes, and of course the diodes here are there in order for the output of all these channels going to a single output in the end, so that the voltage doesn't go back where it came from, it only goes in one direction. If you touch the legs of these as you're playing it, it creates some very interesting effects that you can hear if you watch that video I referred to earlier. So I thought that instead of an unreliable MIDI to CV interface, this one, which has been great fun to work on, by the way, and I've got a lot of practice soldering and things, but it's not reliable enough for my use. So instead of that, I'm going to build an interface for this 10-step sequencer, and you can set it to 0 to 10 steps. You can use it for individual outputs like here, or you can have one common output for the whole sequence. It will light up these diodes, which looks really nice, of course. This one also gets more power, some higher voltage than these ones do. And of course, there will be two options for me now. Either I can run this with the voltage from the Phenol itself. So I'll make an input for that. So we can take a voltage and a gate signal from the Phenol. Or it can be run with a voltage from the control port on the Zoia. And of course, an interesting thing about the control port on the Zoia is I can vary the voltage as well, in addition to creating a gate output at the same time. So that can create some interesting effects, I'm sure. I'll just have to experiment a little bit with that. And of course, that voltage is then split by the 4017 chip. So basically what the chip does is that every time it gets a gate input, so a certain voltage or a rise in voltage, I'm not sure exactly how it detects it now. I think it's a rising voltage that has to be a certain minimum over a certain threshold. And then it moves the output to the next step of 10 steps of output. And that works really well. I was able to play that from the Zoia. It was quite good. And then the output of each of those steps is then run into an LED and to a potentiometer, which adjusts the voltage. The LED is connected to ground, and this one is connected to a diode, and then that line from past the diode is then sent out as the whole sequencer output. I'm going to do more details about that some other time. So yeah, so that was my idea, and I'm going to do that instead. And also another thing, while I was at it, since this was such a big part of my build, I've decided I'm going to redo these panels as well, because they are quite soft. They give a little bit too much. It's a little bit uncomfortable to work with because of that give. And so I have decided that I will make a new panel. I'll just show you that now. I'm just going to move these aside. So I've got loads of pallet wood in my garage because I got lots of pallets for free a few years ago. A lot of it is really dodgy quality wood, but some of it is actually very good quality solid wood. So what I've done now is I've split this piece of wood from a pallet, cut it to size. This is now the same size here as this one. And this is going to be my new front panel. I haven't sanded it all the way down now to keep some of this pallet wood used look. And I've also deliberately took the bit here with the nail holes as well, the rusty nail holes. I didn't have to do that. I could have cut it here and taken a piece down this way, but I wanted to keep that as part of the character of the wood. So this is going to be quite a nice front panel, very solid, very nice looking, and that's going to be my new front panel now. And I'm not going to do labels, I think, for the new things I'm going to do. So I'm going to transfer certainly the attenuators. I'm going to do something with attenuators, and this one of course will be scrapped, and I will make a new interface for my 10-step sequencer. I have some ideas. One of them is to use one of my really good quality 10-step switches, or 11 steps actually, to select how many steps are active on the sequencer. So it's off, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And of course, I was planning to, what would look really nice, I thought, was to put the diodes that show when a step is active, to make that part of this display, so that when I'm at 0, there's a red diode. I think I should put in a red diode there just to show that it's on. And then for first step, and of course I have a yellow one probably, just like on my breadboard here, and then etc. And of course they will light up in sequence up to the selected setting. So that's going to look really nice, I think, if I can pull that off. And of course, to match this knob, which I think is absolutely epic in look, I would have to get some new knobs, because these ones, they will just look so cheap next to this quality component here. So what I'm planning to do is, of course, to have a jack input for the connection to the Zoia. And also, because this jack input can be used for CV on its own without going into the sequencer, I'm also going to have a switchable output. So there's going to be a switch, or probably one of these actually. I'm going to use one of these good ones for that, where I switch from having it as a normal CV output and input, or the sequencer. And then on the sequencer itself, I'm going to have another switch that indicates whether it's in single output mode, like here, so one output per step, or the whole sequence being output as one sequence. I'm not sure if I can run both at the same time. I haven't tried that, but I may try that. So another thing I have thought of, but I haven't decided yet, is I might want to make a slew limiter as well. And I haven't decided whether to do a fixed slew limiter that is then switched on or off, or whether I should make a variable slew limiter. If I make a variable one, I do have more of these switches actually, but it will take up a lot of space. So I could do a 10-step slew limiter. More likely, I will make a just some connections, some banana jack connections that have different slew ratings that I can just connect the output of the sequencer into the input for the slew, and then the output from the slew to somewhere else. And of course, then I could also use that slew for other connections on the Phenol. It doesn't specifically have to be from the sequencer. So I may just make a slew module. Because now I've got this whole space to work with again. Now, of course, because I'm using this huge, absolutely massive switch now, that will take up a lot of space. And if I was thinking for a little while to use just a 5-step sequencer instead of 10, but I think I've decided to go with 10 now. And because I need the knobs for controlling it and with a bit of spacing in between, I think that the sequencer section will take up probably about this much space now. So that will be the outputs, the individual outputs. It will be the sequencer output for the whole sequence. It will be the potentiometers for changing the voltage value of each step. It will be the input for the stereo jack from the Zoia. It will be also an additional input, banana jack, to power it from the Phenol. And it will be an output and an input jack if you use the connection to the Zoia in CV mode, CV in and out mode. And a switch for which mode it is in, and a switch for the input from the Zoia, which mode that is in. So, and all that should be able to fit in roughly into this kind of size, I think. And then I'm going to redo the attenuators in the same style. So it will have to go with the front panel. It will have to go with the switch now. So it's going to look a little bit different, I think. And it's going to be so much more solid. I'm not going to use the Eurorack rail for this because I do not need that when I'm just using one single panel now for the whole front. So this whole panel will just go into my rack. I'm going to put on a little bit of a board on the side here just to pad it out so it moves a little bit forward, and it'll just fit in. I'll put in some screws on at least one side, and I think it'll also be a combination of a friction fit as well, because I made it quite a tight tolerance now. And then that will be my panel for all the modules, and there might be some space left over. I haven't decided yet. I will try to put my banana jacks as much as possible in the middle so that they don't get in the way of the controls. So I'm going to have the sequencer controls on the left, so that's be the switch, and the potentiometers are going to be over here, and then there'll be the banana jacks for that here. And then when I do things like the passive attenuator, I might do something where I just put the jacks here, and then I put the potentiometers on the side there, so they are more out of the way and easier to get to when you get a bit of spaghetti cable mess, which you do almost inevitably. But of course, the banana cables I have, they're quite stiff and they sort of make a nice arch up into the air, and they get out of the way quite well, actually, which is quite useful. So that is, if I remember correctly, the plan now. So I do have, of course, enough potentiometers, but these are quite cheap ones. I might get some better quality ones. I do have enough of these switches. Oh yes, of course, that's another thing as well. I do want switches for switching the steps, individual steps on and off as well. That's one thing I forgot. I knew there was something. So there will be a little switching bank as well. So there'll be a bank of potentiometers for adjusting the voltage, a bank of switches for switching the steps on and off, and a bank of outputs for individual gate outputs from the sequencer. And I'm not 100% sure about the merit of my dual attenuators. I may just scrap that and just have a set of passive attenuators. Looks nice, works nice, and then make some room for a slew limiter as well, which is going to be really useful. And I think I should be able to fill out the space I've got quite easily as well with all those things. And yeah, so quite exciting stuff. This will make my life a lot easier now, because I'm going to skip doing the bit that is the most complicated. I am a novice when it comes to electronics. I mean, what you see here, this is about as complex as I would normally like to do. Of course, there are a few elements here that I can still do that I haven't included here yet. There's going to be some switches. It's going to be, I know how to make a slew limiter. And things like that, but the quite basic stuff, that's what I know how that works at the moment. I've not been doing this for long, so, and this should be quite an easy project compared to trying to troubleshoot something like the MIDIMuso interface, which is a bit of a shame it didn't work out so well, but it was not expensive for me to try that out. And when it did work, it worked really well, and I really liked how it worked. But the thing is, there are so many things that can go wrong with this, because there are 6 chips, well, 7 actually, and there are so many solders. Many of them are quite small. It's hard to do this well when you're not used to it, and there's just so many things that can go wrong. And when they go wrong, it's so hard to find out what is wrong. All this other stuff, it is so basic. The connections are it's so easy to troubleshoot. If something is loose, you can see it. You just look at it, and if the cable is, you tug the cable, and if it comes loose, then you know it's not a good solder. So this is where I'm headed right now with my Synth DIY project. And of course, if you have seen my videos for a few years back, I was talking actually about making a passive sequencer for the Phenol, and this is very much the same kind of principle I was thinking of at the time. I was actually thinking of trying to do it without the chip, but it does make life a lot easier to do it with the chip, actually. So a 4017 chip works really well as a sequencer, and yeah. And I can take the power. I don't have to create, it doesn't have to be connected to its own power supply, which the MIDIMuso interface also would have had to be, by the way. I can power this passively, in a way, from the Phenol or from the Zoia without having to add anything. So there we go. That is the status of my project. Interesting things happening, and I hope you will you enjoyed watching this, and that you will enjoy watching the next one when I show you more about my design. And I'm really fascinated now to see how I can make this look really epic now with this this switch, which I absolutely love. I mean, it's just hear that, just it sounds nice, it feels nice, and of course I got these nice, really satisfying toggle switches as well. Right, so that's it for now, and I'll see you in the next one. So thanks for watching, and goodbye for now.